Hello viewers, Marianne from Revealing Light Tarot. I am reminded of those old black and white movies where Keystone Cops are featured and they just go about and they just wreck things all the time. I'm going to Boris Johnson, of course, and the debacle of the UK Parliament and Brexit. Of course, over the last 48 hours, we've seen some diabolical politics, brinkmanship, failed brinkmanship coming forward. Boris Johnson gained permission to shut down the Parliament for an unprecedented length of time, clearly to stymie any kind of opposition to Brexit from MPs. There have been massive protests in the streets because it was seen as a very undemocratic move. Of course, when Parliament opened again, what happened on that first sitting day was that members of his own party, 21 long-standing and respected Tories, crossed the floor and voted with the Labor and other Liberal Democrats to bring forward legislation which has actually been successfully passed now to prevent Boris Johnson Boris Johnson's government from crashing out of the EU without a deal. So that's the bottom line now. The House of Lords, I think, has brought forward 100 amendments to that legislation so far. Johnson then sought to call a general election, needing 2/3 of the House to get that passed. That failed again, or is in the process of failing. And of course, where we are now is that Johnson will have to push on, kick on with his negotiations with the EU and ask for an extension if there's not a deal done before the 31st of October, providing that legislation has passed, is given royal assent, in other words, passed. Now, it's been so highly dramatic. I read some commentating on this issue, on the Brexit issue, on the situation in the constitutional crisis. Boris Johnson now doesn't have a majority in his parliament because one of his MPs, a long-standing minister in previous governments, went and joined the Liberal Democrats, so he doesn't even have a working majority now. The way forward is tough. It's going to be tough no matter what. If you want Brexit or if you don't, it's going to be tough. One thing is becoming glaringly obvious. It's unlikely that the UK will crash out of the EU on October the 31st, providing the House of Lords and the Queen provides the royal assent to this legislation. Okay, so let's ask, we'll just check on that because, as I said, that legislation is now in the House of Lords. They're bringing forward, this is another tactic, Conservative Tories are bringing forward hundred amendments so far to that legislation. That'll all take time to work through. So let's have a look. It's not over yet. It's not over yet. All right, now my personal feeling on this is that Parliament, a democracy, should not be used in this way. I feel that it is undemocratic for it to be used in this way, and that whatever the problems, they should have been worked through the people's voice, which is the Parliament. Let's have a look. Will the UK crash out of Brexit without a deal on the October the 31st? Because anything could happen between now and then. Will the UK crash out of the EU on October the 31st without a deal? Okay, so we've got Six of Swords, which is moving on. Moving on from what? Moving on from the current situation or moving on from the EU? Okay, the challenge is the unity. Okay, so this is the signifier card. I'm using my Gilded Tarot by Cairo Marchetti. Okay, so the signifier card is the, view or the will or the certain segments of the United Kingdom or voters want to leave the EU, it's challenged by unity, and I should say it's challenged by disunity. So the thing that's preventing Brexit from going forward is the country's not united on Brexit. That's the signifier card. Okay, and that is going to get in the way of anything that's done between now and October the 31st. The Eight of Cups is someone walking away. This is loss. Someone loses and they turn their back. Who is this? What is this? Because we'll ask what's going to happen to Boris Johnson if there is a general election call, because that is the next step, or could be one of the next steps. Temperance, balance in the past, the need for balance, What's in the sky, going back to the drawing board, reworking. This is the deal with the EU. They're going to still push on and try and get that deal. However, this can also be strategies. Boris Johnson failed miserably on 2 occasions now. He has really splintered the Conservatives. Some of those members of Parliament who have now been their whip has been taken away from them. I think that means they've been kicked out of the Tory party, were long-standing, high-profile members, ministers, past ministers, chancellors, ministers going back to the Thatcher government, Winston Churchill's grandson, I think it's Nicholas Soames. This is a huge, huge deal, a big deal. And I think that, and I have to say this will be a little bit of a prediction here, intuitively I'm feeling that alone, the treatment of those members of Parliament who really are not opposing Brexit, what they're opposing is crashing out of the EU without a deal. Now, the polls show, it doesn't matter how many polls are done, that the majority don't want to crash out without a deal. They're opposed to that. Okay, so Boris Johnson, is he going back to the drawing board? We've got the Chariot. So things are likely to come forward very, very quickly now, and that's my feeling. There's this sense of urgency about this still. So I think we're going to see moves and counter moves still, because this is Johnson. He's going to push on. He wants to get his way. But I talked about Keystone Cops at the beginning of this reading. Is Boris Johnson simply just a Keystone Cop? In the past, he's certainly displayed this kind of behaviour, bumbling into things, not being successful. This is also him as Prime Minister. So there's this autocratic link here with Donald Trump. This is actually a link with the US now. I hate to say it, but I feel that that the Boris Johnson's government and the Trump government are talking. The Knight of Pentacles taking action here in relation to the economy. So the autocratic dictator-like moves of Boris Johnson in closing down Parliament to try and get his way, to push through, leaving. He's said on a number of occasions, if we don't get a deal, we will crash out. And I'm happy to crash out of the EU without a deal. What an irresponsible thing to say. It's something that a 10-year-old would say. The environment that kind of autocratic demeanour has generated is action to try and protect the economy. So is this a good political strategy? It doesn't appear so. It appears that the United Kingdom will not put up with that. So I feel that Johnson has badly miscalculated. The Page of Cups, everyone's hoping that there will be a deal made. But this is also no more surprises. People don't want any more surprises. Crossroads cards, decisions and compromise time. And that's the outcome of the reading. That there could be a compromise. What is that compromise? It could be that they get an extension on Brexit and that there is a general election called, which is sort of like a referendum again on Brexit. This appears to be what could likely be happening. However, we've got the moon here. This is also, these dogs are howling at the moon. And so it's a little bit like that's what the uproar in Parliament is like. I think there was one minister or leader of the House of Commons reclining on a chair in the Parliament. It's crazy stuff. And I'll get to Trump in a minute on that note. That will be my next reading. So there is instability there. There's compromises, decisions needing to be made, but there's instability there. And we've got the Nine of Pentacles standing on one's own 2 feet with enough financial resources to do that. That's what is at stake. That's why the compromise will need to be made. We've got this King of Cups energy. I have to say these are the Tories that cross the floor. We're going back to the past, okay? So this uproar, again, I see this happening in the US as well. This is not the way that people want things to progress and move forward. We've got the Magician here. People are starting to see this as a manipulation of their democracy. So it appears to me that there will be a compromise made. Now, what is that compromise? What is that going to be? And the reason there's a compromise made is because of the crashing out effect on the economy. So it doesn't appear that there will be a crashing out on October the 31st, despite whatever the House of Lords will do with the legislation to prevent that crashing out. I still feel that that legislation will go through, and the UK won't crash out of the EU. So having said that, the other scenario is Boris Johnson getting a deal before October the 31st. But would that pass in Parliament? He has no working majority. Theresa May couldn't get her deal through. But I'll ask. I think Boris Johnson has lost every level of support he might have had, but we'll ask, will Boris Johnson be able to get a deal with the EU? Will Boris Johnson be able to get a deal with the EU? Will Boris Johnson be able to get a deal with the EU? Okay, so we've got the government, the Hierophant, not a bad card. We've got the Six of Swords, challenged by the actual leaving. The government is actually challenged by Brexit. The Chariot, though, foundation, things happening really, really quickly. This could also mean a general election. There has been hope. At one point it felt like the democratic norms, the democratic rules were just going to be trampled upon. But those Tories that crossed the floor, that stood up and said, I'm putting country before party, they were the hope. Okay, so they were the hope, and that could actually be the game changer here, because their treatment, the way they were treated, it's only going to gain momentum, because we've got the Hermit card here, and that's Johnson. The Knight of Cups, some sweeteners in some way coming forward. I wonder what that is. The King of Swords, though, I do feel that this is the EU now. And it's generated a feeling of loss. And this is also the members of Parliament. So it's I just can feel the heaviness of this whole Brexit situation. It's been going on for so long now. It's almost like what's been happening in the US. Same sorts of things are happening in the UK. Hopes and fears. This is, again, I feel this is the Treasury. This is the Treasury Department and the economy in the UK. There's real fear real fear. And I read something the other day that it's almost like they've already crashed out without a deal, because so many businesses in the UK are closing up and moving to the EU, which again generates a loss to the economy. The Knight of Pentacles, action to stabilise the economy. Will there be a deal? Okay, there's possibly... let's see what's clarifying that. There's surprise news. There's also an offer there, but there's a walking away from that offer. So there will be a deal proposed, but I don't think it's going to get through the Parliament. Okay, which would mean, let's have a look at the base of the energy, base of the pack energies. We've got the members of Parliament that are opposing Johnson now, full stop, and the fracturing, the disunity will prevent anything really from happening in the short term again, because there is a need now to stop, to call time out, and to fix things, and people will unite to do that. So that's the kind of energy that's just starting to happen because the Tories crossed the floor. However, there is this battle weariness all round, and we've got the Two of Wands. There is going to be a plan made but that it will mature in time. Okay, so I think there's going to be a slowing down of this recklessness while everybody takes stock. Now, I guess the next thing could be a general election is called. If that legislation gets through the House of Lords to prevent the UK from crashing out of the EU, then Jeremy Corbyn has said he will support the call for a general election. So if there was a general election, how would the Keystone Cop go? How would Boris Johnson go? Okay, so if there was a general election, would Boris Johnson win? If there was a general election, would Boris Johnson win? If there was a general election, would Boris Johnson win? Okay, so that's kind of a no here with this Five of Cups. It's the loss card. And so there's also a reaction to loss there. So there are really no winners here. Challenged by insecurity over the economy. That's what's going to go against him. Foundation of the reading, loss for Boris Johnson. I think these cards couldn't be more clear. Coming from a position of being battle weary. He's just lost too many battles over 48 hours. His first speech or his first vote in the Parliament, he lost. Keystone Cops. Okay, the Two of Wands here. There you can see this card in this deck very clearly outlines a crossroads. But it also talks about a plan that matures in time. Going back to the past, which is a nice card. It's like a reunion with your better self, with better times. Okay, the Five of Wands currently, it's this continual fighting in the Parliament and the disunity in the UK. The environment that has generated is a financial loss, and perhaps a difficulty in the economy. The hopes and fears, stable government. This could also be the House of Lords as well. It's very English looking, this card. That's in the hopes and fears. The outcome. Six of Swords, moving on to calmer waters. Knight of Cups. I do feel this is Boris Johnson's energy, though. I feel that it's quick, it's seductive, but when you come up for air, or when you wake up, you see that the night's gone. And we've got defending oneself, yeah. I don't see any winning cards here. What I do see is things going forward very, very quickly, which means there could be an election called sooner rather than later. The Two of Swords, decisions have to be made. It is decision time for the UK with this general election looming, because without a doubt there will be. He's lost his majority in the Parliament. The High Priestess, secrets to be revealed, and then a final card is there's a justice aspect to all this. Really what needs to be, there needs to be a real stepping back. I do feel, though, with the events of the last couple of days, is that this has generated a window, a glimmer of an opportunity to solve this issue. All right. So let's have a look at further down the track. A general election is called. Perhaps there's a change in government. Perhaps there's a coalition in some way formed to govern. Will the EU, will Brexit happen at the end of the day, in time? Will Brexit happen? So I'm hearing that change will occur, but I'm not sure what form that change is likely to have. So we've got stability here. This is what the voters want. Not being able to make a choice. Those two cards, came out of the deck. We've got the Page of Pentacles. Again, this focus on the money and the need to fix things, because I think it's broken. The Moon. There's certainly a crisis of faith here. Again, I'm going back to the economy, and we've got the Queen of Cups. So this energy coming in where there needs to be a revelation, a truth here. Forget the politics. There needs to be this energy where it's a healing energy, but it's a healing energy that outs the truth. That Queen of Cups comes forward a lot for the US as well. So will there be a deal in time? There certainly will be change, and it could be there's a compromise, because that compromise card keeps coming up. Okay. All right. So I asked, would Boris Johnson win an election? It didn't look like he would. One last question. Will Jeremy Corbyn's Labor Party win the election? Will Jeremy Corbyn's Labor Party win a general election? It's almost like he might be the only viable alternative. However, this is the signifier card, which is the UK Parliament, the UK itself. It's just a weariness around this, challenged by the need to get on and do the work to start to govern again. Okay, so that's saying that they will vote for stability, for somebody who can get things done, get back to work. Okay, Brexit or no Brexit, get back to work. All right, the World, endings and beginnings, new start of the new cycle. So that's interesting. Corbyn's cards are better. In the past, we've got things coming forward very, very quickly. I feel this is the general election itself. What's in the sky? People are quite anxious about this now. It's going beyond, can I use that saying, going beyond a joke? The King of Cups in the immediate future, they are wanting this kind of energy now, and it's because they want people to get back to work. This is the legacy that's being left for the voters and their children and their grandchildren. We've got strength and endurance here. Currently, this is what's happening with Corbyn and the Liberal Democrats and those defecting Tories. This is strength and endurance. And it's generated an environment, a need for temperance and balance. Beautiful cards. The hope that there will be new starts. And the Queen of Wands. This is interesting because one thing I've thought is that there could be a coalition between the Labor and someone else. This Queen of Wands here, energy. It is an inspired plan. The mirroring card is greed. The being chained, I think, to Brexit and commerce and expansion again. Let's see what's at the base here. This being stalled energy, the need to move on, to get moving again, but also defending oneself. So it's unlikely, and the Star of Hope is there. So it's a glimmer. It's a little window that this situation can start to move forward. Jeremy Corbyn hasn't got good cards either, or hasn't. He's certainly got better cards than Boris Johnson at this stage today. There are some major arcana there, so he's in a stronger position than Johnson is going into this election. With that Queen of Swords there, it's telling me that this card came forward in my political readings in the US. It's telling me that there's going to be a strong women vote. There's going to be a strong women vote that could bring the election forward, bring an election victory for Corbyn. But he's not going to have it easy because we've got this Seven of Wands energy. It's an upward energy, having to defend oneself. So even if he wins the election, he's going to have to defend his decisions at every turn. But with that star card appearing a couple of times, that's good. That's good. There's going to be a resolution here, which is wonderful. So with that general election, if there is another referendum called, would Brexit get through? And that'll be my final question. If there is a general election and a referendum on Brexit called, would Brexit get through in 2019? The voters in the UK have had a chance to see the chaos that has occurred around Brexit. I'm still getting a compromise feeling, like there could be a deal, that Labor could even do a deal, which would be sort of like a soft Brexit. But anyway, or they might look at change and reform. I don't know how that's all going to work, but that's what I'm getting. Okay, so do the majority of voters in the UK want do they want a Brexit? If a referendum was held today, would Brexit be passed? If a referendum was held in the UK, would Brexit be passed? It's like I just got put it on ice. Okay, which means it goes to the back room because there'll be more pressing things to look at. The King of Wands, okay, so there probably will be a change. There could be a change of government here. This is leadership, inspired leadership, bold and courageous leadership. We've got the Four of Wands. This is there's no challenge here really. That's a celebration card. Okay. Foundation of the reading is the Tower moment. Brexit was the Tower moment, breaking down structures. It was an inevitable breaking down of structures with this Judgment card here. Archangel Gabriel blowing the horn here. This is an inevitable. Brexit was inevitable. This situation that Brexit has created was inevitable. There's a justice issue here. Oh, wow. Okay, immediate future, we've got the Hangman, something being stalled. Okay, so it's possible that if there was another vote called, Brexit may not get passed because we've got this Hangman here. We've got the Page of Cups. This is some kind of truth coming out. Again, I'm seeing the parallels here between the US and the UK. We've got, it would be hard work to get Brexit over the line if there was another referendum. The economy has to be fixed. It's done the damage. There's now needing to, most voters are going to want a new government to get back to work. And there's going to be disappointment. So no, Brexit would not get over the line if there was another referendum held today, largely because of the antics, and that's a Boris Johnson card, and the isolation here. He's isolated. Okay, Queen of Pentacles, stability. People want stability in the economy. They're prepared to act on that, which means they're prepared to vote, and that will change things for the better. Okay, so I may not be right. Okay, these cards may not be right, but currently what I'm seeing today is that it looks as though that the UK won't crash out on October the 31st. It looks as though Boris Johnson will at some stage call a general election. It looks as though by that stage people, because based on his behaviour, will vote another way because they just want stability now. Now the only question mark I have there, it's if a referendum was held today, there would not be a majority for Brexit. But I do feel there's a grey area around Jeremy Corbyn, what he would do with his government. There is going to be change there in relation to Brexit and the UK. The EU and the UK. I don't know how that would work, and I don't. It's too early to even drill down in that. But those critical to this is that those Tories that cross the line are going to be, history will show that they are largely responsible for getting the UK out of this mess, because we know that if there was a crash out on October the 31st, that would send the UK into recession. Very, 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 very complicated, complex, almost unprecedented in modern history that Brexit has thrown up. And there are significant parallels all the time with Johnson and Trump, unfortunately. I go back to Keystone Cops. So, can they get anything right? All right, I'll leave that there. Thank you for tuning in. Bye for now.